Welcome to the official podcast of Joey's Song. You know, at Joey's Song, we have one mission: raise as much money as we can so that research into finding treatments and cures for epilepsy can get the funding it needs. We would love your support. If you can subscribe and leave a review of this podcast, it will help more than you could ever know. If you have a couple extra mouse clicks left in you, go to YouTube and our YouTube channel, Joey's Song, and subscribe. There. In less than 2 minutes, with a couple of mouse clicks, you will have made it easier for others to find us and help spread the word. Now, if you want to do a bit more, head over to joeysong.org, consider buying a show ticket or some merch, or even making a donation. Thanks. You know, we'll beat this disease, and together we'll have some fun doing it as well. Join us. All right, let's do this. Hey everybody, it's Mike Gomoll. As you heard in my introduction, this is the birthing of a new experience here. So Andy and I, and Andy will introduce himself, are going to start a bunch of podcasts we're calling LINERnotes. And it's really just a couple of music dorks sitting around talking music on a bunch of different topics. We'll try to make it interesting. We will try to make it factual. No guarantees on any of that stuff, but we hope if nothing else, it'll be fun and interesting. So you guys all know me on the Joey Song podcast, but I want Andy McNamara to introduce himself. So Andy, welcome to the pod.
Thanks for having me, Mike. My name's Andy McNamara. I work at Code Zero Radio in my off time. Code Zero Radio is an independent streaming rock station based out of Appleton, Wisconsin. Do a lot of coverage of the scene up here, and just super excited to get to know you a little bit more, Mike, because we've known each other now for about 3 years.
Yeah. 3 years,
yeah. But I'd say we don't really know each other deeply at this point.
No, we do it one weekend a year. We know each other.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So this is going to be fun.
Yeah, I think it will. You and I have spent enough time talking about music that I know we are of a similar vein, a little bit different generations, but of a similar vein and a similar level of music enthusiasm that we don't share with everybody because it's kind of embarrassing sometimes. But on a podcast, what the hell, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is, and again, everybody, we reserve the right for this to grow and morph over the weeks as we do this. But the original idea, because there's no new original ideas anymore, is to kind of steal off of PTI, the Wilbon and Kornheiser show, where they pick a topic and they kind of go back and forth and don't have to disagree. But it's just interesting to get perspective, again, especially since we're of different generations, or at least musical generations. I think it'll be kind of interesting. So Andy and I, through hours and hours of extensive prep and research. I mean, God, we had our staff. There's about 7 or 8 people sitting behind desks by me. Andy, what do you have, 5 people up there in Appleton working on this right now?
Last time I checked, it was 5. It's 4 now because of how intense it was. But
yeah, right. One just went screaming out. Just so we decided what we wanted to talk about today, because it's a really fun topic, is great feuds in music. And that's really more of a, not necessarily, sometimes feuds don't, one side doesn't even know the other side is feuding with them, but, you know, classic us versus them, or for us of the Mad Magazine generation, right? Spy versus spy, right? And going back and forth on it, because we thought that would be fun to dig into some of the details and just kind of discuss that. And so we got a whole bunch of things. Some involve people, some involve inanimate objects, and we're just going to kind of go for a while here and talk about that. And at least for me, the original feud, and it's definitely one now in history where we find out it really wasn't one in anything but the press, is the Beatles versus the Stones, right? I mean, Beatles were the first boy band, and the Stones were kind of right behind them, and they had to kind of, and as we can see, I lean towards Beatles. If you're watching this on the video, I've got my little Beatles dolls right behind me here. Is that, you know, Andrew Loog Oldham, the manager of the Stones, decided his best bet was to make the Stones the anti-Beatles, so it kind of created it. Now that's I was at the very tail end of it. I'm just cards on the table. I'm 65. So during that Beatles thing, it was, I was old enough to buy the 45s, but not old enough to know that Paul had died in a car crash and, all that other stuff that was going on. So I wasn't aware of it, but you find out after the fact that it was all manufactured, that the Stones and the Beatles hung out, but it was still interesting. Now that's a little bit before your time, Andy, but you have to be aware of that kind of thing, right?
Yep. Yeah. And are those Rolling Stones bobbleheads above the
They
Beatles
are.
behind you?
Yeah, they
Nice.
are. I got the Beatles and the Stones. And I actually, not that we're going to be able to see it, but I have Oasis over here. Here I can be able to see it, and I'm not going to move the camera. So I've got a lot of. Oh, I already spilled the beans on what our next feud is. Oh crap. Anyway, anyway,
So it's been historical. Like people ask, do you like are you a Beatles person or a Stones
yep.
person? But do you feel that you can like both equally?
You, you can. I think if it's more of a preference. Yes, I absolutely, I love them both. I am a Beatles guy. That's it's actually I'm a Beatles guy and everything. Everybody else is fighting for second place as far as I'm concerned, and that's because they were groundbreakers. I mean, nobody wrote their own songs, nobody, all of that stuff. And up until then, if you look at the rock lineage, it was always a lead person and right, Buddy
Yep.
Holly and the Crickets, or Bill Haley and the Comets, or whatever it was. So they were such trailblazers, right? And and even the British pop stars, Cliff Richard and all those guys that came, they were all doing everybody else's songs. So sometimes, and the music they did was phenomenal, and it holds up today as it did 50 plus years ago. But part of the reason why nobody will ever come close is nobody's ever going to be the first again, right? And they were the first. But I love the Stones. I love their image. I love everything about them and what they crafted with it too. So yes, you can. Yeah, I think people need to have a preference, but you can certainly like them both. It's not oh, I can't stand. You turn your back to people, and so
I think it's amazing the amount of great songs the Beatles wrote in their short lifetime compared
right.
to the Stones have a lot of great songs as well. But if you put a single greatest hits album from the Beatles up against a single greatest hits album from the Stones, you might have decades worth of songs picked from each decade
Yeah.
for the Rolling Stones. But the Beatles, it's that little chunk of like 7 years or so that they were
Yep.
together,
Yep.
which their greatest hits album, I believe, would be more solid
Yes.
than the Rolling Stones, which I think right there just kind of says a lot about what they
Yeah.
did in this short amount of time and how great they really were.
Well, especially too when you look at the evolution, right? I mean, that if you're a Beatles dork, as I certainly am, you talk about the various leaps, right? From Beatles for Sale to Rubber Soul, and then from Revolver to Pepper, and then the leap back when they went back to the White Album, right? It's like, okay, back to basics kind of stuff. And that, when you think about that, literally, if you really want to compress it, that's 63 to 69, late 68. I mean, if you wanted to get really picky, because this first record and a half was a lot of covers. Now, it was still amazing what they did. But if you really go with the songwriting years, that's a 5-year period that took you from I Want to Hold Your Hand to Across the Universe or Tomorrow Never Knows. Or I mean, that's
It's really impressive.
Unconscionable. Like I said, to me, the Stones were more swagger and image, and that's a big part of rock and roll. Don't get me wrong. That's a huge part of rock and roll. And that's, I think, why they are so beloved and deserve to be, at least on the Mike Gomoll Mount Rushmore 2, fighting for second place because of that. But so tell me about the Beatles. Let's talk Beatles first, then we'll talk Stones.
Okay.
The Beatles for someone of your generation.
My mom, I remember, was listening to records when we'd be going to bed, and she listened to a lot of Beatles and a lot of Elvis. So Elvis and the Beatles were the first two artists that I really heard starting at the age of 4 or 5 that I still really love. I thought they were cool. And then when I was about 15, 16, I kind of pushed away a little bit because they were old. They were old music. I was getting into some of the glam stuff out of LA, and then came back to the Beatles, back to Elvis, back to the stuff that I really loved as a kid. And the Paul McCartney, huge Paul McCartney fan too. I don't know if you follow Ringo Starr's solo career, but I do a little bit. But Paul McCartney, he's had a pretty good career since the Beatles as well.
Yeah, just slightly, still one of the biggest acts around, and continues to do what's really difficult, and he doesn't always hit it right, is produce interesting music past 40. I mean, let's be
Yeah.
honest. He can't, and my son Sam, who's a musician, and I have this talk a lot, right? You can't be writing about gonna go get that girl or you broke my heart, when you're 59 and a trillionaire, right? And he just released, as we're recording this, he just released another album slash single. I haven't seen exactly what it is, but it's a very melancholy, look back, the boys from something Dungeon Lane or something, what it is. I listened to it once, and it is, he doesn't sugarcoat his voice. He sounds, and I mean this in a positive way, he sounds like an 83-year-old man looking back on his life. And that takes some guts, and that takes some longevity. And I feel like the couple of times he's slipped, especially over these last 4 or 5 albums, is when he tries to not do that, right? When he tries to, you know, come on to me. I don't remember the songs anymore but Sam and I go see him every time he tours, and always plays a couple of those songs. And there've been a few where I've gone, okay, hopefully we don't have to listen to that one next tour. But that's a really hard act to pull off. Is that relevance as you age, and he's done that, magnificently.
I think when the Beatles were together, John Lennon gave Paul McCartney a little bit of danger in his music, or added a
Yeah,
little edge.
yeah,
Without Lennon's edge, McCartney is more kind of sugar through most of his songs.
yeah.
Whereas talking about the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, you've got Mick Jagger and Keith Richards.
Right.
Keith Richards gave the edge in his performance and just his attitude and
And his life.
yeah.
Yeah.
But when you personally look back at the Beatles, do you see John and Paul having that same chemistry as Mick Jagger and Keith Richards during live performances, even things like "All You Need Is Love" when they were
Yeah.
in a room,
Yep.
or do you feel they were more separate ships?
Well, that's a great question. I do buy into the John gave Paul that edge, right? And the classic example that everybody gives is Getting Better, right? McCartney sings, "It's getting better all the time." And then John sings it because it can't get no worse, right? And that's what people always point to, is that, Paul was always good day sunshine, and John was when the rain comes, so there is a lot of that. And one of the good things that I thought Paul did, I will answer your question eventually too, I am not pretending I'm a politician. One of the good things that Paul did back in I think it was the Flowers in the Dirt record, when he wrote with Elvis Costello, right? And Elvis Costello can bring that same kind of edge, and songs like, oh god, I should have prepared for this. My Brave Face, right, where it's about, I've been hitting the town and it didn't hit back, right? That's a very Lennon and McCartney kind of back and forth,
Yeah.
right? Paul says my relationship's over, I was hitting the town, and then Elvis chimes in and it didn't hit back. So I think that was it. I think the one misconception on all that is that John was the avant-garde one and Paul was the straight up one. And I think history has proven it was more even than that Paul was into weird
Yeah.
soundscapes and all that as well. But I certainly think from the persona standpoint, that was the case. Now with Mick and Keith, again, going back to that initial, would you let your daughter date a Rolling Stone, right? That was one of the famous marketing campaigns that they came up with. They knew they had to lean into that, right? And they were both good at it. From the things I've heard, that Keith was authentic and Mick was calculating in it. That, Mick has always been the businessman and always, tries to think 3 steps ahead, where I think with Keith, what you see is what you get. I think the reputation's like a shadow, man. It's always following you kind of quotes. That's him. I think Mick workshops his quotes, with a test audience 3 or 4 times, but he's able to pull that off. And there was enough swagger in it and it helps when your bandmates, drown in swimming pools on overdoses, and your guitarist can't get into Canada until he gets his blood changed, and all of those other things. That adds a lot of swagger, but that's all Keith or Brian Jones before that. So, yes, I do. But I think, again, they were different things. I feel like Lennon and McCartney were a seesaw, and Mick and Keith were a point of a spear, a battering ram together, and they both absolutely needed each other, I think. So,
Yeah,
but
that's well said.
right time and place for both.
What's our next feud?
Well, it's very similar. So there's two variants to this feud. They both involve a couple fellas from Manchester, Noel and Liam Gallagher. The first one I want to talk about, now this might be, so how old, I'm going to ask this, how old are you, Andy? I don't know how old you are.
48.
48. All right. So you're really in my rear view mirror.
We're very close in age, Mike.
Yeah. God bless you, son. God bless you. So you would have been in rock and roll age in the mid 90s when the Blur Oasis thing was going on, right?
Correct. Yep.
So we're going to talk Blur Oasis, and this was also both a manufactured feud and a real one from everything that I've read and heard. So why don't you, this is more generational, you, because I can tend to talk until the microphone runs out of electricity. What's your perception of that feud?
You might actually know more about the feud than I do because I was not too familiar with the Blur Oasis
were
feud.
you not a Britpop guy?
No, I can tell you the first time I heard Blur, their album Park Life, I loved them.
Yep.
Oasis,
Yep.
I had a thing against them because I heard quotes that they were saying they're bigger or better than the Beatles and all that, and that just made me not want to listen to them. So I didn't listen to them. I know they had some hits that you'd hear over and over on MTV, but I purposely didn't get into them because of that.
Now, has that changed since you've aged, or do you still not?
I mean that I appreciate them now. I think that they did not get to that level of the Beatles, although they are pretty popular still. They've got a huge fan base, and
that last tour proves it.
But so tell me a little bit about the feud between them.
Well, so they both broke out, and I'm not going to get my years right, 93, 94, maybe. Fortunately, there's not a lot of people listening to this, so we won't get a lot of letters. But at that point, right, they had both, I think both of them had their first record come out, definitely Maybe had come out, and I don't remember the name of the first Blur record, had both come out, and they were both very successful. And literally, they both had their second albums done and were ready to come out at the exact same time. And I think they came out within a week of each other. And the whole point was you had to, if you were of age in the UK during that time, you could not like one or, I mean, it was that fierce and that intense. And I think the Blur record came out first, and then the next week, Morning Glory came out. And Oasis basically won because of that earworm called Wonderwall. There's still people right now in a pub somewhere in Birmingham, drunk, just singing that thing, plugging.
It's a great song.
It's again, if you want to talk about image and manufacturing, although like the Stones, it's a real image. It's also very contrived and manufactured. And it took a really long time, and then it faded pretty quickly because Damon from Blur went off and did Gorillaz and a lot of other stuff. Perhaps showed himself to be a little more musically diverse. Because I mean, bands can be pillared for making the same record over and over. Oasis have made a career of it, and God bless them. They're really good at it.
Oasis reminds me of the Black Crowes with the Fighting Brothers, and now they're back together after a very long argument. And you wonder, are they back together because they love the music or because they love the paycheck?
Yeah, right. And I don't know. They actually toured together. The Crowes and Oasis did a tour together. Well, it would have been early 2000s. Literally a sibling rivalry tour or something. I know they toured together with it. I have to I don't know about the Crowes, but I don't think either. I think Noel and Liam, it's kind of like you hear about with ABBA. It would take $1 bajillion for us to do it again. I think somebody rolled $1 bajillion up to them. right? Because certainly Noel doesn't need the money because he's the writer of all of those songs. And, he probably has on the bottom on his Apple Watch just a little number thing that keeps scrolling of every royalty check that's come in since, he started working out or drinking. Um, so, but he can't go out and do those songs to 50,000. He proved that, right? When he did High Flying Birds. I mean, he was supposed to play Madison with Garbage, and that got canceled
Smog.
because of the smog down from Canada. Those Canadians ruin everything. That was a 5,000-6,000, right? Whereas with his brother, he could do 8 nights at Wembley and 3 nights at the LA Coliseum. So in the end, I think it's in between those two things. I think it's part of the adulation, and who doesn't want well, a lot of people don't, but when you're those kind of guys, who doesn't want the whole world talking about you, right? Everybody's talking. I mean, there was nothing. No, I'm sure Taylor Swift was touring. She's always touring. But there was that was the talk from when that stint in Wembley started all the way through to the LA thing. People that don't follow music knew that Oasis was back together,
Yep.
So it's I think it's somewhere in between, I guess, to answer your question. Maybe the better way to say it, it's not the need or the love of money. It's the love of what making all that money signifies. We are the biggest band in the world right now. And we are the biggest band in the world 30 years after we were the biggest band in the world, kind of thing. That,
So your take on the Blur Oasis feud would be winner Oasis?
Depending on what your metric is for winner. I think with respect, I think Damon, I look at it as Damon versus Noel, right? The singer-songwriter from Blur versus the songwriter of Oasis. I think Damon has gone on to do more interesting things, as I said, and some people, Creedence Clearwater Revival and John Fogerty made a career of making the same album over and over and over again. I got no problem with that. People keep buying it and they enjoy it. That's, not everything has to be high art, right? Not everything has to be, I got a D minor 7 on that. Nobody's ever done that before with doesn't always have to be that. So I think certainly from the fame, fortune, adoration, Noel won it hands down. But I think more people respect Damon because of, like I said, he went off and did Gorillaz and a few other things after Blur. And so it depends what your metric is. If you wanted to be the biggest of the two, the biggest rock star in the world, Noel's got it hands down. If you wanted to be the respected musical, whatever it is, I think Damon won. And that's great. 2 winners in a feud, just depending on what your criteria is.
Yeah.
So I got to ask before we go off of that. So in that time, what were you listening to? What was your mid 90s? Were you a grungy guy?
I was completely into grunge, and everything that spawned on the MTV during that period was consuming lots of hours of MTV. I think I had a subscription to NME, which would come with the CD, and I would devour that every issue. And I was really trying to find different things that were outside of what was being played on the radio, which ended up being a lot of what was played on the radio.
It ended up.
I mean, it's
it's
kind of circled around, but yeah, grunge was definitely grunge alternative was huge into that stuff.
Yeah. So basically you have Mr. Vig to blame for part of your wayward youth.
Yeah. And he's still like, I couldn't believe all the stuff he was linked to that I didn't know about till years and years later, even.
Green Day, Sonic Youth. I mean, there's some amazing. I was, not to turn this into you and I just talking, but that's what we want. I was on the phone earlier today with our pal Frank Anderson. We were talking about some other stuff, and you would have a hard time not making the case that Butch changed the sonic landscape for a good portion of the world, right? Or at least the Western world with the development and the sound that he came up with. Certainly Pearl Jam would have happened and Soundgarden would have happened without him, but there's a pretty thick line through the music lineage that's because of his production expertise and his ability to feather out. Who did I see a quote from? I saw a quote from somebody about Kurt Cobain saying that he's probably the last Beatle-y rock star, meaning, because although that was grunge and that Nirvana stuff, it was melodic as hell. With a different set of production values and a different ethos, that stuff could have been, Lemon Twigs or La La La's or, that kind of stuff. And that's what he does. And Butch was the one that was able to take that sound and make it fierce, right? I mean,
Yep.
I think Kurt wasn't pretty fierce, but yeah.
Well, Nevermind is way different than Bleach. I mean, we can agree on that one for sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, About a Girl is very melodic and Beatlesque, but I think Butch had a lot to do with, at least in my opinion, with the getting the harmonies and everything honed in and perfected, and things that otherwise might have just been one takes or that sounds good. He really, put the time in to make sure they got it right.
If you've ever, and I've been fortunate enough to be with Butch when he's been recording some people, and he's always, all right, one more time. And and it's hard to argue with that track record. Speaking of getting, I'm sure he's told the story in public, so I'm not saying anything out of school, but there was one song, I think it was Come As You Are, where they double tracked the vocals. And Kurt did not want to double track the vocals, didn't believe in it, felt it was studio wizardry or whatever. And Butch said, so I pulled out my ace card and I said, Lennon double tracked his vocals. And so Kurt then I think it was Come As You Are. Butch, if you are listening, you can egg my house and tell me I better listen better. But there was some song where Butch knew it needed double track and Kurt did not want to do it because he was still in the corporate rock. And I think we're all better for it. So I think you're absolutely right, Andy, is he was able to make the melodic and the earworm palatable for somebody of Kurt's, whatever you want to call it, generation, because he certainly did that as well.
And that was kind of a callback to the Beatles versus Stones. So Butch went for the Beatles instead of the Rolling Stones to get Kurt Cobain's attention.
Yep. Well, and actually, without sounding like, gosh, I'm always so damn right, Mike. Anybody's fooling themselves if they can't draw a line back to the Beatles in some form as well. But you can and then you can also turn it, because I mean, the Stones were the first, in my opinion, the first riff band, right? I mean, that's what Keith did better than anybody else, is write riffs, right?
Satisfaction, it's the riff.
Right. Yeah. Brown Sugar, Jumpin' Jack Flat. I mean, all of those have riffs that are phenomenal right now. And if you're supposed to believe the stories, Keith even wrote them in his sleep, right? That's the story with Satisfaction. You've heard that one, right? That he used to keep a tape recorder by his bed and he didn't always even remember doing it. One morning he woke up and the tape was at its end and he played it back and he had to go all the way to the back. And there was the riff that became, Keith was writing them in his sleep, let alone, consciously doing it. But I think that's, and there's something to that, right? I mean, riffs are the earworms that stick with you, right? I mean, that's as good as it gets. So, but I think from, again, production and taking chances and, putting a piccolo in and all the other stuff that the Beatles were the first to do in rock songs, it does. And even Kurt Cobain and all those guys will tell you that's the genesis, not Genesis, but the genesis of. So, yeah. So the other angle then to this Gallagher brothers, and we'll do this topic, then we'll take a break, to the Gallagher brothers doing that, is the feud then that happened with Noel versus Liam. And I got so much I could say on it. It says so much about who they are as people, both good and bad. What do you know about the feud between those guys?
Honestly, I don't know a whole lot.
All right, so I've basically picked topics that you don't have any expertise in. So that's what a crappy partner I am.
But I'm here to learn. Enough. I'm here to learn.
Oh, yeah. Well, as long as you're not expecting any truth or facts, yes, talk more with me. So apparently, the story that I know, and again, comes from various sources, is, Noel is the older brother, And Noel is the one who first got into music before Liam even gave two rips about it. And it sounds like the Gallagher brothers could easily have been from the Fox River Valley as well as Manchester because they were both drinking at age 12. Um, and, they lived together, and Noel was trying really hard to get into music and had bought a guitar and would sit in his room and play Beatles records all day and all night. Liam didn't care. And Noel there's a couple stories about, Liam coming home drunk and using Noel's stereo as a bathroom and lots of other stuff because even in their preteens. But the thing that started the rivalry is so Noel got a job as a guitar tech / roadie / van driver for the Catherine Wheel, which was a Manchester band back in the late 80s, early 90s. He went off on tour with Catherine Wheel. And while he was gone for 4 weeks, Liam started a band and had never shown any interest in music. And not only started a band, he was the lead singer, and they were good. And so, Noel didn't know what to make of it. And Liam's band was slowly getting better and better, and they needed a guitar, and Noel was writing these amazing songs. And basically, whether Noel had to ask to be in the band or Liam had to invite him, basically Noel joined Liam's band. And so and I don't have a brother, let alone a twin brother like somebody else I know on this call. I don't know what those kind of rivalries are like, but I can imagine it doesn't take much imagination for an only child to come up with that. You take that together, and then you take the younger, snotty little brother stealing the older brother's dream and having success. I mean, that's just throw a match on the powder keg, son, right?
Yeah.
And then the fact that they're both just very opinionated and literally the definition of English laddish behavior, right? I mean, they're both lads for all the wrong reasons. Although I will tell you, not to turn this into the Butch Vig podcast, Butch told me that actually Noel's a really lovely guy because they did tour. Garbage and Noel and High Flying Birds toured together, and said, no, Noel's a really, really lovely guy. But I can see where if, all you got to do is watch an interview with Liam and realize, boy, that guy would get under your skin really freaking fast, especially if you're
Yeah.
Noel and you're the talent in it. So, but I one time I heard somebody talking about in this as an aside, what somebody once said, and I don't even remember who it was, why do people get so hung up on actors getting all the awards? It's the playwrights, the screenwriters that put those words in their mouth. They're the ones that create these amazing stories. And I can see where, especially with the Gallagher brothers, if you're Noel and writing all these iconic songs, right? And your little brother, now you're making money doing it, so that kind of eases the sting a little bit. But if I can see where that might get under your skin, which again, back to the Beatles, which is probably why it was a lot easier for them because you wrote it, you sing it, you wrote it, you sing it kind of stuff. But, and then as you hinted at with the Black Crowes statement, in the end, they've come back together. They had the biggest tour, probably not bigger than Taylor Swift's, but the biggest non-Taylor Swift or Harry Styles tour of the last 5 or 6 years. Truly amazing. But you're also cashing in on nostalgia now too, right? I mean, everybody that was of the record buying age back in the early 90s is now of the how do I fund my IRA age, right? And they've got a lot of money to spend. So
Well, I had to look up how many number one singles Oasis had, and the internet says eight number ones. So that's a lot.
Yeah, that's pretty, and they were all within a 3-year period. I mean, it's really from definitely maybe through Standing on the Shoulders, probably. Maybe there was another single off of the record after that, but yeah, I mean, and they were very Beatlesque in the fact that during that stretch, everything would just go right to number one, right? Nothing had to grow, after Wonderwall, it was Don't Look Back in Anger, right up. And that's just how it all goes. Amazing. Truly, truly, truly amazing. The other thing, and this is probably a generational thing, so this was back, and we're going to talk about this after the break. This was back before the pre-streaming and everything, and bands would put out single, even CD singles, right? You'd put 2 or 3 B-sides on those. There's a collection of Noel's B-sides that are as good as anything, people put on their straight records. I just think there's something, whether you appreciate him or not as a songwriter, there's something about those fertile periods that people go through where they're just, and the Beatles John and Paul were in the middle of theirs in the 60s. And I'm sure we can look at other people that, for 3 or 4 records, they couldn't do anything wrong. And that was certainly it with the Gallaghers. Because during that time, during the mid 90s, for about 3 years, I worked several months out of the year over in the UK, in London, and spent way too much time at Tower Records in Piccadilly. These guys were really smart, because in order to get your singles, you had to sell the CD singles. So they would put out version 1, version 2, and version 3, all with different B-sides on it. So morons like me, who already had the single on the CD that I bought the day it came out, would then go and buy CD 1, CD 2, and so I'd get 5 copies of Wonderwall. But there were some B-sides on there that were freaking spectacular. So
what were you mainly listening to in the early mid 90s? Was it bands like Oasis?
Yeah, I was pretty settled into, I was a bit of an Anglophile. I liked a lot of the stuff on that Brit pop scene. And then by then I had settled into a nice, steady Wilco, Sheryl Crow, Crowded House. See, I was in Chicago I was told there would be no math, from 86 through 95. So I was there for about 10 years. And I was listening to XRT back when XRT was not corporate. Back in the day, stick with me, kids, when the DJs actually programmed their own music, right? And so Johnny Mars and Terry Hemmert and Frankie Lee and Lynn Bramer and all these DJs had and they would play whatever they wanted to. And they introduced me to so many great bands. So it was a lot of that for anybody that was in Chicago in those days, that XRT kind of playlist, Freddie Jones Band and Crowded House, stuff that wasn't mainstream, but was not, you had to go to the little tiny record store, down on Lincoln Avenue to find a copy of the record. I was not that cool. So that kind of stuff. Cause
kind of like college radio.
Yeah.
Stuff at the time.
Yeah. Not mainstream, but certainly not, I wasn't listening to the Cramps, whatever the hell was going on at the time, that kind of stuff. Cause, by in the 90s, I was a dad with, well, no, I wasn't in the 90s. I was on my path to becoming a dad. Yes, that's how old I am. But I had short hair and no tattoos, and I wore a suit every day of my job at IBM. So I, basically had to be mellow. But that's what retirement does for you. You get to grow your hair and get your tattoos and finally be you for the last few years. So that's what I was listening to.
We should talk about your tattoos on a future show.
Well, there's the know-it-all boyfriends right there. So, yes, we could do that. We could tour Mike's arms. That'll be, let's call the folks from Netflix on that one, because that will be a big deal. All right, let's take a break. We've been doing this, if we've got anybody still listening, we've been doing this for about a half hour. We're going to take a break and we're going to talk about inanimate feuds. Yes, there can be feuds of inanimate objects. So stick around. This is Liner Notes. I'm Mike Gomoll, and that fellow over there in Appleton is
Andy McNamara.
We'll be back in a second. All right, kids, we're back with the second half of Liner Notes. I hate to say this, but we have a new feud. Andy and I now hate each other and will not be speaking to each other. We'll be talking through his brother for the rest of this podcast. Can you tell Andy that I think, these feuds are insidious, Andy? They're just insidious. You and I are both very fortunate in that we know and have interacted with relatively significant musicians. And you learn very quickly that they're just people. Even McCartney's just, although I would faint if I ever got to meet him.
This is kind of off topic, but have you seen videos of people meeting Paul McCartney, like other musicians? And okay,
Yeah.
there's one you've got to see it of Paul McCartney meeting Ozzy Osbourne, and Ozzy's just like,
Oh, yes.
if you have seen that one,
I've heard of that one. I've heard of that one. Yes.
Paul always looks like no matter who it is, he's always in. Yes, I'm the alpha in this meeting. Kind of. Oh, hey, hey. But the
Yeah.
Ozzy
Yeah.
one,
Yeah.
he brings up. Ozzy said, "Oh, I've been a big fan. You're what got me into music." And then Paul says something to him like, "Was that after the burglary or something like that?" And brings up how Ozzy was wearing like fingerless gloves. Then like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Ozzy says
Yeah.
something like, "Well, that's kind of how I am," or that's
Yeah.
the kind of stupid stuff I do. But I
Yeah.
don't know if there's anybody that Paul McCartney has ever met musician wise that he's been nervous because he always looks like he's in the position
Yeah.
of
Probably not since 65. You can imagine, when they met Elvis, perhaps, or when, if you ever met Chuck Berry or one of Little Richard or one of those guys. But no, yeah. And he is always the alpha in the room. I mean, he is. I mean, he is the, I can't, there's nobody, I mean, certainly nobody in the music business and probably very few people that he would not be the, I mean, I know, so not to spill the beans, but podcast that I recorded, I became friends with a guy that is opening up the Bruce Springsteen uh, Center for American Music. It opens up in June, and I know Bob Santelli is a pal now from Cubs camp. Yay Cubs, go Cubs! From Cubs camp, and he's built that. He's built that with Bruce. He also built the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and a couple Grammy museums. That's what he does. And we've had a chance to talk informally as well as formally. And, even Bruce kind of genuflects in front of Paul. And there's very few rooms when Bruce isn't the alpha male in it. So I think pretty much up the chain, everybody kind of does that. Yeah. Yeah. But
he's earned it.
Getting back to you and I have both met people of relative fame and we quickly learn. And mostly for me, I've been really lucky in a good way that they're just people, right? And they are just
Yeah.
people. So they can have feud and their feelings get hurt and all that other stuff. So it's great. I love that stuff when it's really not damaging and it's not, I think both Gallagher brothers are okay. I
Yeah.
think Damon is okay. I think Mick and Keith and Paul are all okay. So I like that stuff. But let's take it to a path where things don't get feelings hurt because they're inanimate. So we're going to talk about a couple feuds. We're kind of stretching the definition, but it's our podcast, so we can do whatever the hell we want. Is maybe we'll call it conflict. The first one is CD versus vinyl. So
Collectors
that would have been
feuds.
again, yeah, right. Again, mid 90s when all that was happening. I can remember, actually, my God, now that I think about this is spooky. The first CD I ever bought? Paul McCartney's Flowers in the Dirt, because I fought buying CDs because, I was a purist vinyl and I had way too much vinyl. And I remember I was living in Chicago at the time and I bought Flowers in the Dirt. But when that first happened, that was a huge controversy. So where do you stand on all of that?
I have to say that I as well remember my first CD. It was Roxette Joyride. Because
Yeah.
at the time I was calling into this show called Hitline where you could talk to people and they'd send you a CD if you got through. I got through to them, and I remember it was the first CD that was mine, and I was looking at it and staring at it, and I'm like, wow, I own a CD. And
Yeah.
listening to it, no skips, like everything was on one
Right.
side.
Right.
Ended up
Go to
loving
whatever you
CDs.
want. Go to whatever you want. Find the song right away. Oh yeah.
Pulled the plug on buying vinyl, and then all of a sudden fast forward 15 years, and I'm in half price books selling like 100 CDs for for $10, and it's back to vinyl again, like buying
Yeah.
everything vinyl. But it's collectors. I've heard things about CDs making a comeback, which I find really hard to believe. I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's going to be a small group of people.
Yeah.
Being like into the local music scene, CDs make more sense to buy,
Right.
but people aren't buying them to listen to them. They're just
Right.
buying them to support. And Joey's song, to kind of connect it, you guys started by doing CDs and
Right.
then got away from that.
Yeah. Yeah, and we were right in that time zone when people, and that'll be our second feud that we talk about, when most people decided to stop paying for music, right? I mean, I'm
Yep.
exaggerating, but not much, right? Instead of paying 10.99 and owning 13 songs, you pay 0.0079 cents for each spin of "My Heart Will Go On" by Celine Dion that you play. So yeah, confession time of a music dork. I unfortunately do not have a great ear, in the sense that I never spent a lot of money on my stereos, and everybody else, well, you got to have a Harman Kardon 852X with a Johnson subwoofer, and make sure that the flange is set to 5. Yeah, I always bought the cheapest one, because I don't, and I've really learned that with my son Sam, who, as I've mentioned earlier, is a musician and has a very gifted ear. And he can hear he'll go, oh, the saxophone on that. And I'm going, I don't hear a fucking saxophone, Sam. You know, I hear melody and that kind of stuff. So for me, it was never a big deal. But I know there are people, and I don't know how much of it is suggestion or not, that swear by vinyl because of the warmth and all the stuff that you lose. And it's not impossible for me to think. I don't think as many people that declare that they can hear the difference can, but I would guess, when George Harrison was alive and he said, I hate them, they just don't have, I believe that George Harrison probably could tell you the difference, but if he was listening to a vinyl or a CD. So there is probably some of that, but I'm a lazy bugger, and you can't beat the convenience of now you can't beat the convenience of streaming, even though it's going to kill musicians. If you're just looking at convenience, that, CDs have it hands down. But the beauty of vinyl, again, this is one of these old man yelling at clouds. What, the generation will never understand, and I'm hoping there's a few baby boomers listening to this, the beauty of all new records came out on Tuesday. I don't think they do that anymore. So all the new releases were always on Tuesday, and you always knew months ahead. People didn't drop a new song that you didn't know was coming. You always knew the new Queen record was coming out on February 13th or whatever it was. And you'd go down and you'd buy it, come back and you'd put it on, and you'd sit on your bed and you'd read, right, the gatefold, and you'd read the lyrics, and you'd read the liner notes. A great name for a podcast, by the way. You read the liner notes, and you'd read the inside, and you'd see who they'd thank, and that, so-and-so did hand claps on it. You would spend a whole day with your new album, and you just don't, and not just listening to it, reading it, seeing, it was just something beautiful.
Well, then I find out that you got Flowers in the Dirt on CD, so I'd go over to your house to listen to it. We'd sit down and listen to the whole thing. Now I can just send you a link to the album, or you can find it yourself, and there's no like listening together and discovering through each other.
Yeah. Boy, this could really turn into old men yelling at clouds really fast here, Andy. But the other thing that people don't understand, these kids today don't understand the thrill. So again, I worked in the UK for several summers, and they're probably still there. There was a whole series of used CD shops in Notting Hill, CD Exchange, I think they were called. And what you would do is you would just spend hours thumbing through, looking for something you had never seen before, or, something you couldn't find. Because here's a phrase kids don't know anymore: out of print, right? Something was out of print. So you couldn't get that kind of stuff. And the joy of finding that. I've been looking for the version of, and discovering stuff that way. There was just something really amazing about that, and fun, right? And, there's still some places. Have you ever been to like Amoeba Records in LA?
Yep. That place is huge.
You can still do some of that there, right? And it's getting better now again, because limited edition stuff is coming out, and deluxe editions of stuff. So stuff that you didn't have before you can get. But, it's the thrill and the the experience that used to come with music versus the ease and simplicity that we have now. And both are good, I think.
Did you happen to see what Dave Grohl did a week or two ago, where he made 20 limited edition burn CDs, made art for each cover, and then he numbered them, and then he did little Facebook reels of him hiding them around
I
Encino.
did not.
And then he posted all the clips at the same time. He was in like a Target, and then, it would be his hands putting the
Yeah,
CD behind something, and then he went into like an Ace Hardware or something, and then put it behind something. And I think that's kind of a cool
magical.
old school way to advertise or promote.
Absolutely. That I had not heard that. That's fantastic. Yeah. That's a great way to do it. And I hope Dave doesn't suffer financially from that.
did Sam grow up listening to your vinyl, or did you have all that put away or
No,
sold?
but so like a lot of the kids, he grew up riding in the car with me, listening, um, and then when it became clear he was into music, I basically grabbed all of my greatest hits packages: Beatles, James Brown, Stones, everybody that his dad felt he needed to know about, and put that in, and he listened to that. But he was already of the age where you could even without us, you could find it on YouTube, or find stuff that way. But I'm really lucky. Sam is an old soul with music. I mean, an old soul. He likes production value. He's huge into the Motown and Stax production, and he knows all that stuff. And he is um, I can't even get him to like hard rock. I mean, like he looks at me like, grow up, when I say, just crunchy guitars, Sam, first chorus, first bridge, chorus out. No, because he's into um, funky, vibey stuff. He's into Geese right now, um, which I was able to say, oh, that's just Dinosaur Jr., just 30 years later, right? Which it is. Um, but I have to say, I am now a full fledged, can't see it because of my camera. I am a full fledged Deadhead because of Sam. Never had any interest in the Grateful Dead. Saw him one time in Chicago at Soldier Field back when Jerry was around, and about halfway through Drums in Space, wanted to open a vein and just end it. I was so bored because I hadn't taken any acid. It was hot. I hated it and had no interest. And then Sam's a big John Mayer guy, and we had to go see Mayer when Dead and Company were touring. We got tickets to two shows at Wrigley, were the first two we had ever gotten. And one we had seats off to the side, so we weren't getting a good sound. And we were both like, oh my God, this sucks. And it did. Second night, we were right on the field, right in the middle of the speakers, and a light bulb went on. And now in the last 5 years, Sam and I have seen Dead and Company. Well, we're not going to see them anymore, but had seen Dead and Company probably a dozen times. We would go to Vegas every time and do a whole weekend of shows. So Sam has actually turned me on to a lot of music. I probably, started the beast, but he's the one that finds all the cool stuff now. I just keep listening to Beatles.
Well, this is kind of a question outside the topic, but did you share any music loves with your parents at all, where you could listen to something
No,
like your
not
dad?
not not. Oh yeah, no. My dad grew up in Oshkosh, and he has a polka collection. That's all I need to say to you of 78s. I did learn
Frank
about
Anderson
Whoopi
would
John.
approve.
Absolutely, I did learn about Whoopi John, and that I can tell you, the beer barrel polka, and She's Too Fat for Me, and all that. No, um, although in hindsight, I maybe what my dad did listen to that 60s country. So like Johnny Cash and Buck Owens, I didn't appreciate it at the time. I do now. I do now understand. Probably it's, and here's where I go and start alienating people. Probably it's the crap coming out of country music now that has made me realize I always loved Willie Nelson. For some reason, I liked Willie even when I thought country music was awful, probably because just there's nobody cooler than Willie on the entire planet. I mean, who at 92 comes out with their own brand of weed juice? Come on. That's perfect. Um, I always thought Willie was cool, but I now realize why Waylon Jennings was cool. And I realize why Buck Owens was great, and even despite his wacky politics, why Merle Haggard was great. And my dad was listening to that stuff. But I didn't, but I've gone back to that. But no, that was not, I didn't inherit that from my mom and dad. I don't know. It's weird that I'm so into music because I'm not musical at all. I sing like a dying quail. I hear music like I spend my days on a bomb site, but I love all of it. But that's why I can't hear the saxophone. I just like the verse, chorus, verse, and out stuff. So no, I didn't get it from my parents, but and I will tell you, yeah, get me going here, Andy. You put a quarter in me. Um, Even though Julia, my daughter Julia, who's a couple years older, is not a musician and has different musical tastes, when she goes out with her, they're not in-laws. I don't know what you call her partner's family, but I will call them in-laws. And they go out a lot in northern Wisconsin. Julia handles the jukebox and gets tons of compliments because she knows to put on, Brandy, you're a fine girl by Looking Glass. And, I can see clearly now and all that stuff. And she always says, my dad taught me. My dad taught me. So I didn't help Julie with much, except she knows how to handle herself in a northern Wisconsin bar with a fistful of quarters. So, I guess that's all you can do. Now, did you get your love of music from your folks?
I did,
You
specifically my
mentioned your
mom.
mom with the
Yep,
Beatles and Elvis.
yep. And we would, when I was like 7 to 10, we would have family TV night where we just watched MTV. So I got to see,
Seriously? Oh,
I
wow.
got to see songs from the Police. There was a John Fogerty, Old Man Down the Road, that my dad really
Yeah.
liked. And, I
Yeah.
remember when the Thriller video came out, that was a big
Oh,
event.
yeah.
Like we all watched that.
And they would
But
show it
yeah,
at the
they,
top of the hour for about 3 or 4 weeks. They would always show it at the top of the hour. I remember that too.
I mean, that probably ruined me more than anything. My
Yeah.
9-year-old really wants to see it, and I refuse. Like, I'm making him wait a few years yet for that one because I don't want to have to go to sleep with him every night. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think music was always something in my family that we bonded over. And my first concert was Paul McCartney at County Stadium with my mom and brother, and my aunt, and that was really special to me. So I,
Sam and
I
I
don't
were
know.
at that. Sam and I were at that show with Miles Nielsen. We brought Miles and Kelly with us to that show. Yep. I
That's very
We
cool. And
actually now let me show you how cool I am. That was Brian Ray got us. We were able to go back. We did not meet Paul, but we met everybody else in the green room. And I had to tell Sam that, first of all, I said, if Paul comes in, I am shoving you out of the way, Sam. Just so you know, you will be like the person in front of me at a Black Friday sale at Walmart. Um, but we don't always get to go backstage at one of the biggest shows. Yeah, I that was the first big concert I took Sam to was Paul McCartney in St. Louis. We drove down to St. Louis. So yeah.
well, just being in the
So
green room, even though Paul wasn't in there, he was
yeah,
probably in there
yeah,
earlier, and it was still probably had the vibe going on.
he's right over
I'll get.
there. He's got to be. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I
I've
mean,
got it.
we met Abe and Rusty and Wicks, the rest of the band. So, and Sam's got pictures with all of them. And then a couple years later, Brian actually played Joey's song. So
At Barrymore, right?
that's right. Yep.
A
And
very
he
intimate
did.
setting.
I Want to Hold Your Hand. He did what did he call it? A Cars version of I Want to Hold Your Hand. I've got it on tape somewhere. So yeah, yeah. So
Question to end the cassette vinyl thing for you, Mike. When do you think, or do you think there's going to be a time where digital recedes back completely to where people are in droves going back to physical media?
no,
Do you think it's going to be a cost thing if it gets
I
too
think it's a
high to the point
convenience.
where,
I think it's a convenience thing. I think that you when you can see or hear or interact with anything, and this is going to change too, right? I mean, who knows what
yeah,
they'll be truly foldable soon, right? Where it's literally the size of a chiclet, and you unfold it and it's a 58-inch digital screen or a hologram or whatever, holograms coming out of our watch. I but yeah, I mean, who knows what the medium will be like? I mean, maybe there will be something with holograms that require that it's just not enough computing power and all that to do it. But I can't. I think again, you and I come from a different planet as far as dorkdom and our need for the ephemera that comes with it, right? And the need for all that. Most people, again, I'm going to veer off the road here a little bit and talk a little bit about Joey's song. One of the marketing challenges that I have in explaining what the event is it takes too long to explain who the people are and why you should be impressed with it for most people, right? My classic example is my pal Chris. Oh yeah, Chris Collingwood's playing Joey's song. 98% of the people are going to look at you like you just put a turd under their nose. What? Chris Collingwood? Right? And then the next thing is going to be, Fountains of Wayne. And I start singing Stacy's Mom, and after they're done recoiling from the horror of me singing, then they go, oh yeah, because that's how most people consume music, in the background or as an afterthought or as wallpaper, right? And so there's no need for most people, as long as they can get to the sound or the picture easily and it's not crappy quality. I just think most people are going to do it. Now, there may be, what you may get to is artists will realize that you need to produce stuff that is only available in a physical manifestation. But you're going to have to be the big boys. It's not going to be, Andy McNamara and his, all kazoo orchestra aren't going to be able to put out a limited edition, only available physical kind of stuff. But, you could see.
Nobody would buy it, would be the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you only produce 2, or you can do the Dave Grohl 20 approach, and do that.
Out.
I mean, yeah, you can't get them anywhere, man. You can see where that could conceivably be a thing. But yeah, well, what was it? Wasn't it Wu-Tang Clan that produced the one version of that record, and the Pharma Bro bought it? Now somebody else has it, but and they haven't broken down yet. I don't think you can get it anywhere other than that one thing. So maybe, but not anything that's mass consumed. It will be for the dorks only, I think.
Well, the thing about Spotify as well, it really feeds you the top 10 songs from that artist. If you go there and just listen to the artist, you never hear anything new. If you go check out a band that's been around for 30 years and they put out something in the last 5 years, you're going to get all their hits from the first 5 years played. Right. And most people will turn that off as soon as those get over.
Right. Well, but I will. I happen to be an Apple Music guy, not a Spotify, but they're both the same thing, and they're both just as evil. If you do take the time and do the scroll down, at least on Apple, to get the similar artist stuff, you can find interesting stuff. But again, most people, they want to, I got to listen to such and such, and they play the Beyonce CD, and then their phone sits over here. They're not, scrolling down on it. So yeah, the pluses and minuses are just too, I think the gap is too wide for it to be a significant anything for most artists. But the flip side of it is, I don't know if you've noticed this trend with live performances, the big guys don't tour anymore. You come to them, right? I mean, they're doing it at the Sphere, and Harry Styles is doing like 30 nights in New York, 30 over like a 2-month period.
Residencies
and
cheaper.
Yeah. And that's what, so you're going to be SOL if you don't live near Chicago, New York, or LA, maybe Dallas, maybe Nashville. But I mean, I would do the same thing if you were of the stature to do it. Right. So, and I don't think anybody would have guessed that that's what 10 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, but you know what I'm getting at. So who knows, maybe there will be, again, with holograms or something else where you really do need to have some sort of physical media, but at least how people consume entertainment. I mean, what do you think?
I think it's here to stay, but I have that hope that it isn't.
Yeah.
I think I think there's got to be a limit if they keep raising prices where some people will say, I might as well just be buying something new every month and have it.
Right.
I was talking to somebody a few days ago that spent thousands on iTunes songs like 15
Oh,
years ago.
bought
And they
them.
were bought them and they were complaining how that was the biggest waste of money and the biggest scam. And yeah, it does seem like that now. But if you look, I think if people saw how much they were spending on these streaming services over the course of a year, 2 years,
Right.
3 years, I think a lot of people that might be enough to push them towards physical, but it's just so convenient that most
It's the
people won't care.
convenience. Yeah, it would have to almost become significantly more expensive to offset the convenience.
And the price of vinyl is going up too. It's,
Yeah,
I think the record stores that I've been in, it's $40 average,
it
which
is.
is pretty high. I think for that.
Sam came home last week. He's big into Father John Misty. You know who Father John Misty
Yep,
is? Josh Tillman from Fleet Foxes. We're actually heading out to Seattle this weekend to go see a couple of Father John Misty shows.
very
Um,
cool.
but he came home with vinyl. He had been in downtown shopping and $35.99 for. I mean, I remember back when Tom Petty came out with Hard Promises, right? And because the records wanted to move up from $7.99 for an LP to $9.99. That's why he called it Hard Promises. He said, "Well, if you don't sell this at $7.99, I'm not going to release it." Now, probably with inflation, $7.99 from 1984 isn't that far off from $35.99. But if you look at, like you're saying, if you look at it in one LP that is inconvenient to play and listen to is worth 3 months of your streaming service.
Yeah.
Math isn't in their favor. It's just not in their favor. And God, who knows now with glasses and chips they're going to put in your head? I mean, you can't even imagine how, you may not even need your ears anymore to listen to music. They might implant it right in your brain.
How many Joey song CDs came out? How many volumes did you do?
We did
Five.
5. So
And
we did, go ahead.
are you still sitting on a lot of inventory, or is that all?
No, no. We didn't do that many to begin with. One of the things that I did early on was I gave lots of different charities CDs for free to sell. And so I donated several thousand to the Epilepsy Foundation and to some other stuff. So no, I've got the boxes are those 40 in each one. I've probably got 3 or 4 of each CD, so maybe 100 of each one sitting in there. That was a case. Now we're really going down a wormhole. That was a case of the effort was not worth it, even though people had stopped buying them. That was 2010, 2011, right? Right around the time when streaming, not Pandora, but streaming, or Napster, not Pandora, when, Napster, when everybody was illegally sending free files and all that stuff. People had started streaming, and nobody was, people were literally making a donation to Joey Song when they were buying the CDs. And I don't know how much you know about the process of how money gets paid on songs, but for a song, there can be 5, 6, 7 entities splitting the royalties on it, right? You can have 3 songwriters that each have their own publishing. You can have the label, and you can have the artist, and blah, 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 right? That all have a claim to some of the royalties. And like most contracts with that, there's always, so what we would do is we would ask people to give up their right to the royalties because A, we wanted the money, and B, we were in no position to track all that. I mean, that's probably the biggest overhead that a record company has. And if you read much, they don't do a very good job of it because it seems like artists are getting hammered every time, to get them all to clear it. Painful. And they all have what the most favored nation status in all their contracts, which says, I will give up my rights, but if you're paying anybody else in this, I want my royalties, right? So to clear, each one of those CDs had between 13 and 15 songs on it. And to clear that, with each one of them having 4 or 5 entities that all had a claim in it, was horrendous, to say the least. And at that point, Joey Song had literally no money. So there was my friends there's a label called Omnivore, and they do CD releases. Cheryl Pavelski out of Milwaukee runs. She and Audrey now live in Oregon, but and their business is those repackage. I don't know if you're familiar with Omnivore or not,
yeah.
but they
put out a lot of great stuff.
Amazing stuff. And the boy, that's a podcast right there, getting CP on and Brad to talk about what they've gone through, because that's a fascinating story. But anyway, their clearance guy was doing it all for free, and that's hundreds of hours to do that. And then they weren't turning into anything. We quit that pretty quick. And I've got a couple. I tell anybody that'll listen to this, I have a version of the Jimmy Cliff song King of Kings that AC Newman from New Pornographers cut for me, did it just for me. He goes, I'm going to make the whitest version of a reggae song you ever heard. And it's meant we did kid CDs and adult CDs, and it's great. It's lions say I am king, and Carl does it super white, like he said. It's catchy as hell, but we couldn't get Jimmy or Jimmy's people or Jimmy's publishing to give it up. And I couldn't put it on, I couldn't say, all right, Jimmy, we'll give you 2 cents per CD, but I'm not. And I've got a couple other things on my hard drive from people that did the same thing because, they wanted to cover it. And so anyway, we did that, but we gave up pretty quickly. Fortunately, we would always do a CD release party with it. And so by about the third one, even Dumbo me figured out, gosh, we're making more money off of the live events than we are off of the recorded music. Which is exactly what the business has become for anybody not named Rihanna or Taylor or Beyonce. That's why you go to a show and bands are touring 200 dates a year now that COVID's ended, and they're touring with 2 people, and they're living in a van down by the river with Chris Farley, and they're doing the meet us at the merch table after, because the whole, it used to be, for you kids out there, it used to be record labels would foot the bill. You got record label support to tour. So you might not make a lot of money, but you wouldn't lose it because the labels felt like you roll into town and everybody buys this. And, that's all gone now. Right. Yeah. So, we, by pure serendipity, experienced right at that point what the industry was going through. So, like being the shrewd businessman I am, I said, you know what? I'm going to get all these big stars and not pay them a penny, which is a hell of a business model. But anyway, that's what we stopped doing the CDs because they weren't making any money, and there was tons of work for no reward. And then, fortunately, good old Butch came back into my life right around that time, and turned it into the spectacle that it is today. So crazy.
Yeah, it's just it's CDs, pretty crazy life for them. I don't see them coming back. Hopefully those Joey Song CDs that you have find a home eventually. I don't know if maybe they'll end up going to your son and daughter someday, and they can keep them for their future kids if they have any. And
explain to the kids, yeah. Like I used to have to explain why we would put a nickel on the tone arm of the record so it wouldn't skip. Yeah, I mean, there was 3 things that they didn't understand at all: tone arm, record, and skipping. But yeah, I don't know. If you would have told me the toys I was playing with back in 1964, if I just kept them in the box and not playing with them, I could have funded my kids' college. So who the hell knows? Antiques are antiques, and the way that technology is moving so fast, it may only take 2 decades for CDs to be considered a rarity. I don't know. And like I said, who knows how music's going to be delivered in the future? I wouldn't pretend to be Arthur C. Clarke here and being able to see where it goes. But I think to finally, after 35 minutes of doing this now, Andy, answer your question, I just think convenience will always win out, especially as we get busier and busier. And because most people don't live and breathe it like you and I do, right? They just don't.
That might be a good place to leave it.
It would, because
Exactly.
now you and I can go sit in a corner, dark, and rock back and forth about how sad it is that people don't understand the beauty of physically owning the music. That's good. Well, I don't know about you, Andy, but I thought this has been great, although I've done 90% of the talking, which is how most
Yeah.
conversations go with me, because you've been gracious in asking me questions. Next time when we do this, we're going to find topics that are in your wheelhouse, I predict.
I had a great time. And anybody that made it to the end, thanks for listening.
Yeah. For both of you, send us an email if you made it to the end, and we'll send you some CDs. That's what we'll do. We'll send you some Joey song CDs. Actually, Andy, this has been great. I think we're going to have a lot of fun doing this, and I hope people
I agree.
enjoy two dorks talking about music. So for Andy McNamara, I am Mike Gomoll. We call this Liner Notes, and join us real soon when I will let Andy get a word in edgewise. So, Andy, thanks a lot, man.
Thanks, Mike.